to your practice?
So social aesthetics is integral to my collective practice, as we are constantly considering the social aspects of our practice in aligns with the visual aesthetics. The visual side of it has got some significant importance, but the more significant part of our practice is to be capturing that emotion and expression along the walls, as that sort of sense of creating and using art as a tool for like mental well-being and helping us improve our state of mind. As when I've been researching, I've discovered that there is a link between creativity and other such calming activities like yoga and exercise. So I wanted to see how we could try to capture that within our collective practice, which through the way we are creating, we are trying to encapsulate and create this sort of well-being effect through the use of repetition, the use of expressive and gestural marks. So yes, social aesthetics is very, very important to our practice.
And how does art affect people, and how might that be relevant to our practice?
Art can affect people in different ways. I think there's many factors that impacts the way we view and see art, but I would say one of the most important things is actually the act of creating art. The act of creating art enables and enacts all these different positive brain activities. So for me, I would say it fundamentally changes your thought process and your emotions. So it doesn't just help you to express, but it can actually fundamentally make you feel a lot better, which is hard to explain. But like I mentioned earlier, is that there's lots of links that have been found through carried out research and reports and cases that art can drastically change your health and can even reduce down the amount of medication you may need to take.
And can you discuss how art reflects on reality?
That is an interesting question. So art is, I feel with our art specifically, and there is other art that's approaching this as well, is that we're always trying to be in the contemporary and be in the now and be constantly reflective and adaptive to the ever-changing society. We are currently in a media-driven society, so with our collaborative specifically, we are focusing on how the media impacts us in one way or another. It may be mentally, politically, socially, or environmentally. These are all interlinked, even though we may see them as separate subjects. They are all impacting each other. But it can be difficult these days to reflect on the reality and the realness and try and get a sense of authenticity in our practice, and also capture realness when we're in a time now where we've got hybrid realities. We've got a mixture of false reality mixed in with the rawness and the realness of some of the realities now. So it can become really hard to determine whether the reality we're living in is actually the reality that we are reflecting on, because there's all these different illusions going on. So it can be very difficult to properly reflect on what is happening, and that can also take a toll on our mental well-being. So we're always making sure to be mindful and wary of when we're approaching some of these topics to not overwhelm our audience, which could be a problematic matter when you're talking about modern day topics.
And can you talk about contemporary culture and how that's relevant to your work and how that might be used?
So with our contemporary culture, it can be quite a wide and broad subject matter to try to approach. But when it comes to the contemporary, it's always, we find ourselves questioning the nature of art and how it's constantly changing and evolving, how art maybe wasn't seen as important maybe for our mental well-being, and it wasn't maybe valued as much as maybe more value placed on it now, because there's more recognition of the fact that art is important in order to have that sense of a good morale, and to also build the communities that are broken down, especially in the day and age we find ourselves at the moment, where we have current things like the pandemic, which is impacting the way we interact with each other. But we're also, I think art at first was maybe seen as something that was accessible, but maybe in terms of like viewing art, but it's maybe more accessible now that you can actually, more people can create art. It's not maybe so much about skill and knowledge, it's now about how art makes you feel and how it makes you feel in general. But also art has now got more of an individuality about it. You can express yourself and you can use it as a form of art therapy, rather than focusing so much on a specific style or a certain aesthetic. You're more focusing now on actually expressing yourself, and that coming more through the art, rather than it being a set aesthetic within a set of rules that it needs to fit in within.
And can you talk about the ethics of art and the reason we make art?
That is an interesting question. So when it comes to the ethics of art, one thing that we need to be maybe mindful of is that because of art is becoming more individualized, is recognizing that maybe something might not be aesthetically what we're conditioned to see as aesthetically beautiful, but just because it maybe might not fit one criteria within, say, aesthetics, doesn't mean that it's not of value. And this idea of viewing something based off of, well, viewing art based off of its aesthetic quality is problematic in itself, because in the media-driven age that we're in, a art piece might be seen as valuable due to the status of the artist or the creator. If the artist or the creator has a high social status, then they may have their work viewed highly upon, whereas somebody who maybe has a lower status in society, they may not have their work viewed as much due to the person that they are. So that it becomes problematic when you think of what's viewed as an art piece, because somebody who's maybe already world renowned as an artist, or they're famous in other ways, they may have their work viewed upon of more value than those that are not so well known.
And how about art and health, and obviously well-being and mental health? You already mentioned a bit about that, but if there's anything else you want to add?
Well, I would say art could sometimes have that ability to sometimes have that reputation of maybe provoking a situation and sort of prodding and poking around, and not really, it can be seen as a provocative tool to try to sort of antagonize certain subjects, when actually sometimes art is the intention of art a lot of the time is to try to solve the situation, when it's actually sometimes used as, sometimes it can be seen as a form of activism or an attempt to try to deconstruct a situation, which is something that with our practice, which we might get mistaken for, because we're trying to solve and help some of the issues that surround ourselves with today's cultures, where we're trying to solve the issues of mental well-being and how we can improve that, and we're trying to think of ways of solving. But sometimes, as in the nature of our practice, and if we're talking about contemporary topics, sometimes it can be seen as a provocative tool, when it's actually a tool used to try to help solve today's issues, not just to bring it up and provoke it.
I think that's fine.